You clicked on the thumbnail. You know what video this is. Another week, another contenders and pretenders tier list in the SEC. And Scary Saturday is upon us. Yes, this is a palate cleansing week. What we saw in week 5, what we're going to see in week 7, nowhere near that same level of marquee matchups. But don't think that your college football fandom can take a Saturday off. You will see upsets. You will see games go down to the wire, thus creating a ripple effect that could drastically change the way we view the SEC. So let's not waste any time. Welcome on into SEC Unfiltered. It's Cole Thompson. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button down below because this is your #1 source for all things SEC moving forward. We're on the race to 20,000 subs, and your help is greatly appreciated. Download the podcast version of the show. Follow us on the social channels at SEC Unfiltered to keep the back and forth banner between you and I going at Mr. Cole Thompson on Twitter and Instagram. And check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at RHOBACK. Look good, feel good this upcoming fall on game days with the promo code SECU for 20% off your first purchase. Fall pitchers are on the horizon. Game days in the fall foliage is about to happen. Don't you want to dress the 9? Do so at RHOBACK.com. As always, precursor before we begin this video, how you rank today will not be how you rank in week 13. You can change. This list is going to see fluctuation throughout the entire year. So just because you're in the spoiler category doesn't mean you can't move up to the contender. Just because I had you in the contender category, Ole Miss, doesn't mean I'm going to keep you there. So let's not waste any time as we always start 2025. Mississippi State, you're still here. Give you one quick stat. You won the time of possession against Texas. A high-tempo offense headlined by Jeff Lebby actually played momentum football. They kept it on the ground. They were able to keep things moving. They won 34.57 seconds, ball in favor of the Bulldogs. That's all I got. Oh, and then we got Auburn added into the list. Auburn, welcome to 2025. You're going to be here for a while. Here's the stat. If you didn't have 11 turnovers, you would be 5-0. No, seriously, if you didn't have 9 turnovers, you would probably be 5-0. If you take 2 turnovers out of the Cal game, you take 2 turnovers out of the Arkansas game, and you don't throw a pick 6 to Kip Lewis, and you punt on 3rd down, you probably win that game. And now you're going into the oldest South rivalry undefeated. That's all I got. That's all I got. There's really nothing else I can say. Pretenders category, Vanderbilt, you kick this thing off. Here's the deal. You get a bye. You showed what you're made of against the Missouri Tigers. You went on the road. Diego Pavia power. Again, man, we still have that NIL deal in place at Thompson Tech. Just let me know when you want to come on down. There's reason to believe that Vanderbilt is going to be a tricky team to prepare for. Defensively, they're better than advertised. Offensively, they have an identity on the ground with Cedric Alexander, with number 2 as your quarterback. You are playing Alabama. Let's just call a spade a spade. It's Alabama, and they're coming to Nashville. This is not going to be a game where you probably walk away feeling pretty confident about yourself. But this could be a game that you make interesting. You control the tempo. You control the usage of Diego Pavia's legs. You put yourself in a position to where going into halftime, very similar to how a team like Missouri felt, Alabama feels. They know that rat poison is alive and well in Titletown after winning against Georgia. Can you keep that rat poison at a peak to where in the 3rd quarter, maybe our opinion of Jalen Milroe, maybe our opinion of Alabama, maybe our opinion of what is Crimson Tide football underneath Kalen DeBoer is a little fluctuated. You're not winning this game, but if you keep things close, you certainly are in conversation to win multiple SEC games still. Arkansas, welcome to the pretender category again. I tried. I tried to give you help. I tried to give you praise. I try to let you believe that there is something promising here. I can't. Here's a fun stat. Arkansas is 0-2 when they outgain opponents by over 100 yards. Oklahoma State, they outgained the Cowboys 648 to 385. Found a way to lose in double overtime. Texas A&M 379 to 297 in the Southwest Classic, the final one in Jerry World. Thank you, Lord, we don't have to deal with that anymore. You still found a way to lose that game. Countless turnovers, careless penalties, miscommunication, bad formations, all of it aside, is just Arkansas football. They have a defense that I think can give you a good punch. They have an offense that can catapult their way to success. They have a team that does have pieces that certainly are better than what their record says. They are better than a 3-2 team. The problem is that the miscommunication, the fundamental mistakes, the flaws that continue to hinder their success are not going away anytime soon. And it's because it's a culture thing. Yes, this is basically the Super Bowl of the weekend. You take on an undefeated top 10 Tennessee roster coming off of a bye. How they prepare will ultimately determine what version of Arkansas we see. There's a moment where you feel like that you're going to see a Taylon Green pull an Aragorn and say, for Pittman, and then run into the fires of Mordor that is the Tennessee defensive front and try and push his way into an end zone. That's what you got for Arkansas football at this point. That's it. You're not going to be a team that goes to the college football playoff. You're not a team that's a spoiler. You're just a team that knows how to probably play up to your level, and maybe a team will play down to yours. Lastly, let's throw in Florida. You won a game on the road against the Mississippi State Bulldogs. That's awesome. You're once again an underdog in the swamp. That should not happen. That should not be a thing. Never in your lifetime should you ever hear the words Florida underdog swamp in the same sentence. But you are. You enter as a field goal underdog against UCF, who, by the way, got boat raced by Deion Sanders in Colorado last week on their turf. And the Gus Malzahn special is alive and well. For those of you that know SEC football, you understand that Gus Malzahn finds a way to lose a game that he shouldn't and win a game that he shouldn't either. This kind of feels like that type of game. You're going to rotate the quarterbacks. How does Graham Mertz and DJ Lagway look? Last time we saw them, it was arguably their best performance. You got the guy who is the king of the slants and Mertz. You got the guy who's not afraid to uncork it and Lagway and the mobility. Can the tackling be there? Because Billy Napier, I'm going to be completely honest with you. Right now, your approval rating is at about a 0 down in Gainesville. When the last time folks saw you, they would rather get behind the wheel of a car and drink and drive while watching a Don't Drink and Drive ad than listen to you talk about your team. By the way, SEC Unfiltered is not promoting that in any way whatsoever. Please do not do that. This is, again, a liability that we have to throw out there. But still, that's where the fan base is at this point. That's where they are. You lose to UCF, you may not be fired on Sunday morning, but the writing is on the wall that your days are numbered down in Gainesville. And there is no coming back from losing to a Big 12 team. Now let's move on to the spoiler roll. One team this week. It's Kentucky. We won't see them play. We won't know what version of the Wildcats actually are meant to be on the field in Lexington. But here's the deal. They're a 4th and 8 conversion away and potentially a field goal from beating the number 1 team in Georgia in their backyard, and they got the marquee win of the season so far against Ole Miss. If you were to tell me that Brock Vanderbilt going into the final Ole Miss drive had more passing yards than Jackson Dart, who led the country in passing, not the SEC, the country in passing, I would have called you an idiot. I would have said, oh, Jackson Dart got hurt on the second drive, so naturally Brock Vandagriff had more passing yards. No, because the defense is that good. The defense once again stepped up and showed you on a primetime atmosphere that they can go toe-to-toe with anybody in the country. And they can, which is why they are a spoiler. You look at their schedule, you look at who Kentucky has to face, it's not just Auburn. It's not just getting a win against a Tiger team that has given up on 2024. It's against Tennessee. It's against Texas. It's against Louisville. They just showed you that it doesn't matter where they play, it's how they play. Can the offense be more sustainable? Ole Miss's defensive front was able to corral the rushing attack to where it really wasn't that great of a performance. But Ole Miss's offense did nothing to reciprocate it. So how do you look against those other teams? And can you not just watch as Mark Stoops finally drops a pair and says, hey, let's go for it on 4th and 6 and get a 63-yard bomb from Brock Vandagriff? Can you get more consistency? Because if you do, 8-4 is on the table. 9-3 is on the table. 10-2 is very, 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 very far-fetched, but it's not technically off the table. So if you're Kentucky, you got to be feeling pretty good about where you sit currently heading into the month of October. Very spooky season upon us. Now let's move on to the wait and see category. As always, there's enough to believe that you're a pretender. There's enough to believe that you're a contender. We wait and see where you rank. For starters, Oklahoma, they're on the bye. You marched into Jordan-Hare Stadium, one of the most toxic, hostile environments in all of college football, and you got to win with little help at offensive line, with almost no help at wide receiver. Congratulations, J.J. Hester. You are now seeing multiple reps in the Red River Shootout, which, by the way, is the only name that we're going to call it on this channel. Nothing else is even close to being considered. With a freshman quarterback making his first career start. If you don't believe in Sooner Magic, I don't know what to tell you, SEC fans. It's alive and well. Norman is now normally accepting that Sooner Magic will be a thing that's following them from the Big 12. And their defense is good. Kip Lewis, the design blitz that they had to pull him at the last second to get the pick 6 on Peyton Thorne and then tailing it back for an easy interception for 6 points. You're okay with that. Oh, and Auburn's got dudes. People want to think for 1 second Auburn is just the worst thing to come around since the invention of the iPhone. No, Auburn's got guys. Keandre Lambert-Smith is one of the best receivers in the conference. Cam Coleman is a stud. They got guys on their team. And Oklahoma's defense shut them down enough for Michael Hawkins to lead a drive that was going to give them momentum, and they get an interception. You do that against a team like South Carolina, you win the football game. You do that against a team like Ole Miss, you can win the football game. You do that against a team like Texas, we know what the Red River Shootout is. We know what it is. It's a crapshoot. Best of luck. Throw out the playbooks and just watch 3 hours of awesome football. It's why it's one of the best rivalries in the sport. You could also find a way to still finish 5-7. I don't know what to make of you. Your offensive line still has questions. I want to see a healthy wide receiver core, but you can't rule them one way or another. They are still 100% in wait and see. Speaking of which, Texas A&M is in wait and see. They could be gaining some ground momentously this weekend at Kyle Field. Defensively, they're there. You saw as both Shamar Stewart and Nick Scorton lived up to expectations. One is a former 5-star phenom. The other one is a transfer coming on in from the Big Ten. There's reasons to believe that with this front 7, they can go toe-to-toe with anybody in the country. LSU, South Carolina, Auburn, Texas, they can. The question is, what about this offense? I believe, and I've said this multiple times, Connor Wigman gives you much more upside, but Marcel Reed fits the system better. There's enough meat left on the bones over wins against Bowling Green and Arkansas to say, if Connor Wigman is healthy, we got to give him a shot. And I think they will. We don't know if he's going to be playing this weekend against Missouri. And I'll tell you what, Missouri's defense is better than advertised. And if you can't create separation with these wide receivers, if the ground game can't be potent, headlined by Le'Veon Moss, who, by the way, nearly outrushed Arkansas in the fourth quarter than Arkansas had all game in the Southwest Classic with 98 yards. Yeah, that's saying a lot. You might be paddling upstream with styrofoam pads wondering, this is just our year. 8-4, 9-3, 10-2, they're all available. It's not shocking to think that Texas A&M is as advertised because they have the right coach of Mike Elko. But the offense is still leaving points left to be desired. It's eventually going to catch up to them. Does it against a Missouri team that does have a defense that will put them in third and unmanageable, third and uncomfortable, to say the least. Let's talk about it, South Carolina. This is the ultimate game that it feels like South Carolina could win. It's also one that they could lose. And they could win by a game-winning field goal. They could win by 10 points. They could be blown out by 20 points. It's all about momentum. South Carolina's defense is going to be a reason why they have a shot at going 9-3. I've told you, they are the wild card of college football this year. There's a lot to like. The big question is going into this game against Ole Miss, who literally is on life support. Do you have Lenore Sellers and do you have Rocket Sanders? Because if your ability to run the football is going to be critical, but your ability to force the defense to have to corral the box to create one-on-one opportunities on the outside for Mazio Bennett, for Jacobs, for Simon, for whoever else you have, for Campbell, that is where you're going to win. Because you got to realize Brock Vandagriff and this Kentucky offense mastered a game plan to put Ole Miss behind the sticks and down out of the count. They did. That's 100% how it worked for them. Can South Carolina do that? If they have a guy in Lenore Sellers and they have a guy in Rocket Sanders, I believe that they can. And then if you win this game, momentum's at an all-time high. Going into next week against Alabama, going into face off against an Oklahoma team coming off of the Red River Shootout, going on to face off against a team such as Missouri, such as Clemson. 9-3 is not off the table. But if you see the same problems that existed when you played Old Dominion, if you see the same problems that existed at times when you played LSU, it's going to be a long afternoon. What version of Ole Miss are we going to see? That remains to be the question. Let's talk about LSU. LSU's on a bye this week, which is probably a good thing because if they need as much time to prepare for what could be one of the best games of 2024, my main point is you saw 4 quarters of consistent football against South Alabama. Not South Alabama, let's call a spade, but Gio Lopez is going to be a name that eventually I think enters the transfer portal. And LSU looked apart. Defensively, that was probably their best performance. 9 tackles for losses, 4 sacks on the day. They were able to move the ball on the ground, not efficiently enough, but still 8.8 yards and 4 touchdowns. Josh Williams had a good day. Caden Durham had a good day. Garrett Nussmeier threw 2 picks, but he also threw 2 touchdown passes. It was an overall 4-quarter consistent performance. Can you carry that against Ole Miss? Can you carry that against an Arkansas? Can you carry that against a team like Alabama off of another bye week? Because if so, this is a team that can go to the playoff. Again, I've told you all offseason, the main thing that I looked for when it came to talking about a team like LSU was not the pupils, but the teachers. And the teachers are doing their job defensively. Blake Baker, Bo Davis, Corey Raidman, they're making enough even without Harold Perkins. And so far, they looked promising against South Alabama. But there is going to be more challenging competition than the Jaguars, including next week when an Ole Miss team comes into town. Speaking of which, Ole Miss, strike that, reverse it. Ole Miss, there we go. What are you doing? What the actual hell was that? Because if I know that one thing in my brain is saying, well, you tried to play down to the competition. You weren't prepared. That was the single worst play calling performance I have ever seen in my entire life by a Lane Kiffin-led squad. End of conversation. There is not even a debate for this one. I'm sorry. When you look like that, and that is your best punch, one great drive to open up the playbook, open up the series, get a big time catch by Trey Harris, punch it on in with the Henry Parrish Jr. touchdown, and then for like 3.5 quarters, we don't see anything minus then a Trey Harris touchdown on a 4th and 6. That's not good enough. And your offensive line does not look prepared to take on Georgia. It does not look prepared to take on an Alabama like you invested in this offseason. And Jackson Dart only came and catered to one person. But what if number 9's not open against South Carolina? And now you got to trust Juice Walls. And now you got to trust Jordan Watkins. Now you got to trust Caden Prieskorn. You should not be having games where your team and the stat line says 1 target, 15,000 targets to another dude. Now when you have this personnel, and you can't blame the defense because the defense did its job. 5 sacks, 10 tackles for losses, held them to 93 rushing yards on the ground in a Kentucky team that can really only run the football with the physical brand, and you still lose. You are on life support. And this is a game where either you get it together or you're basically waving the white flag. The next 2 games will define Ole Miss's season because of how they look, not the record. You can go 1-1 and still make it into the playoff if you beat Georgia, but how you look will give you a better indication about what you are as a team. One that was completely overhyped, that never got its foot off the ground, that trusted NIL more so than building a culture, or a team that just had a bad day at the office. I lean more so the latter, but I have been wrong before. I will be wrong again. Please, Darnado, Lane Kiffin, everyone of this team that I have been talking about all offseason, don't make me wrong about this season in week 6. Week 10 is fine, but make it at least week 10 before I have to start eating crow. And finally, Missouri, you played against a freaking Vanderbilt team. And I love Diego Pavia, but you were much more complete than them. And it starts with the deep ball. Now, here's the thing. I know and I've read the report about where currently Brady Cook's system is, how he was dealing with a shoulder injury. I get all that. Your defense has done its job. They were able to keep that game close. And again, it's Vanderbilt. You want to keep this game close. But still, the defense did its job. Offensively, you have the weaponry. People seem to forget that even though you lost Cody Schrader, most of your offensive line, you didn't lose any of your 5-star talent wide receivers. You still have Mookie Cooper. You still have Theo Wees. You still have Marquise Johnson. You still have Luther freaking Burden. You have everyone. Brady Cook has got to play better in this game because this is going to be the first time in a road atmosphere, which, by the way, Mizzou is underdogs in simply because Kyle Field at 11 a.m. is probably one of the better environments for an 11 a.m. kick. Not the point. The point is that in a road environment against a team like Texas A&M, you don't get that second shot. You don't get that chance to come back. If you're down by 10, you're staying down by 10. And it's only going to get tougher from here. You got games against Alabama, which if you lose on Saturday at Kyle Field, that might be a must win to get into the playoff, or at least guarantee you a spot in the playoff. You got games against South Carolina. I'll tell you what, that defense is going to give you fits. I don't know what we're going to get in Auburn. I don't know what you're going to get in Oklahoma. I don't know what you're going to get in Arkansas. But you cannot afford to look that way against anyone else this year. You got to play consistent football. Defensively, you're there. You're top 5 in pass coverage. You're top 10 in run defense. You're playing good football underneath Corey Batoon. It all comes down to the deep ball accuracy from Brady Cook. And if Brady does not cook, you have to bench him to let Drew Pine cook. It comes to that moment. Mizzou is a good team. Mizzou is not playing like a top 10 team, but they are a potential top 10 team. It's time to start acting like it and optimizing October. All right, contenders, this one's going to be really quick. I don't want to spend that much time. Tennessee, they didn't play last week. They didn't have to play last week to know that they're in the contender category. If you give me that brand of defense for 4 quarters, I don't care what the offense looks like. I really don't. I know I'm going to get a couple of big-time runs from Dylan Sampson. I know Nico Iamaleava is going to connect with somebody. Maybe it's Mikey Matthews. Maybe it's going to be Dante Thornton. Maybe it's going to be Chris Brazzell. Maybe it's going to be Squirrel White. But they'll find their way into the end zone for 2 touchdowns. This is the beginning of what could be a very lengthy tenure of Rocky Top rolling. It really can. This feels like a team that kind of has brought in its mojo, brought in its aura. Like, have you ever seen the movie? Have you ever been to a movie theater and like you're trying to decide between getting, I don't know, Sour Patch Kids and Gobstoppers, or better yet, how about Sour Patch Kids and M&Ms, and you don't know which one you want to do, and your mom goes, you know what, just get both. Let's get on out of here. That could be Tennessee moving forward. Sour Patch Kids being the offense, which is humming right now underneath Josh Heupel, and M&Ms being the defense. A good sturdy chocolate mix that gives you that stout front, and that's what you have. They have a good secondary. I don't want to hear anybody say they haven't played good quarterbacks. Doesn't matter at this point. Their defense is still making plays on the back end, and they're creating turnovers and opportunities. They have the most underrated linebacking room in the country. They have the best front 7 in the SEC, and they're only going to get better. And they won without Zalance Hurd and multiple offensive linemen missing reps in Oklahoma, in Norman. I don't care anymore. This is the team that is in contender. And until they lose emphatically, and I mean disastrously, the way that Ole Miss did, they're going to stay in contender. The same thing goes for Georgia. Sell me on them being down 28-0. Sell me that they didn't look good in the first half. They added in no pressure. They were playing in zone the entire time. They were letting a team like Alabama create their opportunities to strike deep. Ryan Williams, if you haven't heard of him, he's 17 years old. Have to throw that one in there at least once every episode or else we're going to get fined. They allowed them to eat. And then in the second half, they didn't. If that second half game plan with the consistent passes, the 4th down conversions, winning with the slant route with Carson Beck, the confidence rising, shows up every single week, they will not lose another game. Georgia has an Alabama problem. That's just the bottom line. Until we see them surely surpass the Crimson Tide, Alabama is their kryptonite. But South Carolina is Kentucky's kryptonite for Mark Stoops. And they just went down to Oxford and absolutely eviscerated Ole Miss because Ole Miss had no offensive identity outside of throwing the football to Trey Harris. That could be Georgia, where they just ground and pound it, throw it down your face, have good, consistent red zone opportunity striking moments with the quick passes to Dylan Bell, to Oscar Delp, to Kobe Young, whoever it may be. You feel good about where this Georgia team is. They're going to be in the playoff if they go 10-2. If they lose one more game and it comes to Texas, nobody is going to bat an eye. But this is also the wake-up call that I think Kirby Smart and this roster needed. They wanted to know that they could be beaten. Now that's a very dangerous roster that you're going to face off against a team in Athens. And by the way, Georgia, their next victim, it's Auburn. Best of luck to you. Let's talk about Alabama. Actually, strike that. Let's talk about Texas first because I want to save Alabama for last. Texas, they did not have the best performance against Mississippi State. Mississippi State was able to control the tempo very early on in the games. There were a couple of errant balls dropped by wide receivers. The one with Jonte Cook, I can't watch again because you're not going to see much more prettier passes from Arch Manning that just land the breadbasket and ultimately come back to bite you in the keister. But Arch did his job. Arch came in and he stabilized the roster for 2.5 games, just like we saw last year with Malik Murphy when he filled in. And now it's time for Quinn Ewers to deliver. You get the bye week, you get to get right, you get to get mentally prepared for the Red River Shootout, and then you get to prepare for Georgia. And in those games, in those matchups, this is where you will see Texas show who they are in the SEC. Are they a team that can easily hold their own and make it down to Atlanta, hoist up a conference title, get the first round bye, and then immediately win a national championship? Or are they a team that is still a little bit flawed and is going to get its lumps and bruises while still being in the playoffs contender category? Sorry about that. They're not missing the playoff. This is a team that will not miss the playoff in the slightest. I can promise you that. And the same thing right now goes for Alabama. Find 2 losses. Find them. I don't see it. I see one, potentially. Tennessee. Rocky Top rolling in the 3rd Saturday in October. Because it's Knoxville It's Neyland. Remember what happened last time when high-tempo offense took on Alabama with a quarterback that was going to be viewed as a Heisman contender? Yeah, I remember it too. It was not a pretty picture. In fact, it was a very sad picture on that day if you're an Alabama fan. But their offense can be the best in the country. Ryan Williams is only going to get better. He is the most sought-after wide receiver recruit and the most polished player I have seen at the position since Amari Cooper in 2012. He is that talented. He is not going to be able to strike that. He can live up to the moment. There are certain players that you just can't teach living up to expectations. They just have it indoctrinated into their system. That's him. 100%. He's that special of a dude. He's that special of a talent. I promise you this. You're also going to see better runs from Justice Haynes and Cam Miller. And in my money, you got the Heisman Trophy winner right now. Jalen Milroe will win the Heisman if I had to vote today. Because if he has the marquee win, and he was a reason why. Phenomenal performance against Georgia, and those are not slubs. Those are 5-star superstars on the sideline. They are here to make plays, and they're doing it. And defensively, you have a young secondary that constantly is making opportunities for themselves. Xavier Brown should not be getting a game-saving interception, but he did, and he lived up to the moment. And you have a veteran in Malachi Moore who's frustrated at himself for getting a pass breakup rather than an interception. You're watching as Deontay Lawson is making plays. Agent Zero is flying to the football and making sure that it's a strike 10 times out of 10. You got a Fred 7. Kane Womack delivered a first-half performance that was promising. And outside of stopping him on 4th down in the second half, Georgia had fits multiple times and had to get creative on how they were going to attack. Alabama has to avoid the rat poison. But if they do, they're shooing for the college football playoff. They're shooing to be considered a national championship contender, and they're going to be the toughest out if you do not give your best punch. Basically, at this point, for Alabama to lose a game, they would have to play a C+ performance. And depending on who the opponent is, that still might be enough to get them a double-digit win. But let me know in the comment section down below. Who are your teams? Where do you rank your tiers? Remember, it's interchangeable. We'll be back here after Scary Saturday, breaking down everything that we have to. Like, rate, review, subscribe. Follow us on the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at SEC Unfiltered. If you want to go back and forth with me over the banter, it's at Mr. Cole Thompson, and check out all of our great work found at SECUnfiltered.com. Scary Saturday is going to lead to upsets, so don't miss it. Don't go out apple picking. Don't go out with your friends. You don't need to play 18. That's meant for Sundays. I'll see you all next week. It's Cole Thompson. Peace.